Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be around the globe. I hope you're having a really great weekend. It so happens to be the Father Day weekend here in Australia. And so for all those fathers and those fathering adults that are looking after their children, we wish you all around the globe, especially in Australia and everywhere else, celebrating a very, very happy Father's Day. Now, let me tell you something. We have got the most extraordinary show. It's been so exciting to prepare for this. And this has been since 2005 in the making, when I first met Kristen Furseth in our bridal salon in New York City. And who would know all these years later, she'd be in Africa, literally at the outskirts of the Greater Kruger National Park, which is our guest coming up, talking about how she went from corporate America to living in Africa, living the dream, as we say. I just want to start with my thought of the day, and I will do that when I get to the beginning of our countdown. Very much welcome to Henry and Friends Live right around the globe. Well, it's very, very interesting. First of all, welcome to you all. It's exactly 1 minute past 31 minutes past Sunday morning. So it's 31 minutes past midnight in Johannesburg, where Kristen Furseth, our guest, is waiting behind the green room. That makes it exactly Saturday night, 6:31 p.m. in New York City, which then makes it exactly 11:30 p.m. on Saturday night, 11:31 p.m. on Saturday night in London, Greenwich Mean Time, and here in just becoming blue skies outside in Sydney, Australia, it's exactly 8:32 in the morning on Sunday. Welcome to you all. It's been a very exciting week. I hope you've had a great week. And it's very interesting when I have my thought of the day, and we're going to quickly jump into Kristen Furseth, who's waiting in her green room at the Greater Kruger National Park. This is about, obviously, living in Africa, living the dream, journeys and paths. And I just had to say to all of you that this week, I think you know already, ABBA, after 40 years, has actually come out with their new album. And I have to tell you, I'm going to be putting that link below in our description box. And the first song that they've come out is Do I Still Have Faith in You? And I just want to read this because it's so apropos for Voyages. So this is ABBA's new album, Voyage. And it says here, do I still have it in me? I believe it is in there. For I know I hear a bittersweet so in the memories we share. So it's very, very filled with nostalgia. And I think this is a really, really excellent segue into this weekend's show out of Africa. So let me introduce you very quickly to our guest, who's going to take us through her story. Don't forget, you're watching us on Henry and Friends Live YouTube channel. Please click our subscribe button. Last weekend, we had over 6,000 viewers on our What Do You Kids Really Think? So you might want to go back on YouTube and go to our backlog, because we're having some fantastic responses now that we've opened up to YouTube. And for all of those who are new viewers, welcome. And those of you who join us on a weekly basis, bring up a sofa, pull up a coffee, pick up a cup of tea. If you're in the right time zone, in the right age group, grab a wine or a cocktail as I introduce you to our very, very first guest. And now a little intro. We live in a time when we think our dreams have been stymied, or maybe we don't have the dreams that we thought we were going to have. And after you meet our next guest, you're going to reignite the dreams you've always had, because this is going to be taking us on a safari, on a journey, on how you go from corporate America to living in Africa, living the dream. So with the big drum roll, I want to introduce you to Kristen Furseth, who's going to be coming on board in about 10 seconds. From IBM, Paris, New York, and Amsterdam, to track and field and Olympic trials, from a very significant accident on holiday in St. Bart's, a divorce, and a huge plan to leave everything behind and make a journey of a planned dream to living in Africa. And I'll tell you something really interesting. What's so fascinating about this interview is it's my very, very first guest, not just out of Africa, but also the very first guest that is on fully solar power as she speaks to us now. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome aboard the most extraordinary, effervescent, goal-oriented person that's now living out of Africa in full solar energy, Kristen Furseth. Welcome, Kristen.
Hi, thank you, Henry. How are you doing?
I'm very, very good. So tell us a bit of your location. So how far are you away from seeing, the national park animals and the wildlife, and how far away are you?
Okay, so I live in a big five, which means it has all the predators, the lions, the elephants, the leopards, the Cape buffalo. I have the big five outside my doors every day. But I'm also about 20 minutes from the formal Kruger National Park, from the Orphan Gate. So I can go there for a day trip whenever I'd like.
So can I ask you something? Have you ever had a circumstance where you've had a bit close to comfort with maybe a giraffe or a zebra or any of those animals?
With an elephant and with a nyala. And a nyala is an antelope type deer with very long horns. And they are the sweetest things. They really are. But they can gouge you with their horns without really realizing it. And they do tend to come up to see you, but you need to back off. And I had one that was going after a warthog, and I kind of got in the mix there. And that was just a few weeks ago. And but I did not get horned.
Very friendly until you get part of their horn situation, part of your horn action. For all of those joining us, you're on Henry and Friends Live, our very special guest out of Africa, and thank you for your graciousness. It's exactly 37 minutes past midnight on a Sunday morning. You've gone up specially, or stayed awake specially, from all our audience to you. Thank you. What I think everybody's really interested in, the first 15 minutes of this hour, we're going to be doing your backstory. Then I promised everybody, we'll be opening it up to your syrups and also questions. So any question you have, please start typing them out in the message box, in your comments box, because we definitely will be answering them this week. So I want to hand it over to you, and Kristen, and I want to ask you, can you give us a little bit, like we've got some notes here about your path, which is, look at this, guys. Can you give us a little bit of a brief on your backstory, what you're about, and we can just absorb and learn Kristen Furseth's backstory.
Okay. So I mainly grew up in Michigan, in the United States, although I was a foreign exchange student for a little over a year in the Netherlands when I was 15 and 16, and established a lifelong connection to that country and to the people. I go back every few years and visit all my friends and my Dutch family. Then I came back to Michigan, and I went to Michigan State University, was pre-vet, needed some time to figure out, after I realized veterinarian wasn't going to work, I went to Greece and lived as a foreign exchange student / athlete in Greece. Then I came back and finished and got my bachelor's degree in supply chain management at Michigan State University, worked at General Motors, got married, had 2 children. After 11 years of being married, realized that the marriage was not working. So I went back to school and got my master's of business administration so that I could get a career to take care of my children and myself. Started working for IBM in Paris, Amsterdam, and then also in New York. My children became of the high school age, where I wanted them to be back in the US. And my ex-husband, the father of my children at the time, was from Ireland. He was going to move back to Ireland, but he decided not to. So I took a position in state government so that my children could have access to their dad and have a relationship with their dad. And we were the first couple the first family in Michigan to actually do a week on, week off custody arrangement. And, it had its trials and errors, but it worked out really, really well. And my kids grew up very, very great. When I was in college, I was an athlete, but I had severe back problems and I had to have laser back surgery. I was the first person to have laser back surgery. This was in 1982 because I was so young and in good shape. I still competed, but I still worked out, but I didn't compete until I started to go through the divorce. And then I got back into triathlons and running, and did go to the world championships twice in triathlons. Came back.
Wow. Just gonna take a breath. Wow. Carry on. Amazing.
Had a goal. I always wanted to go to the Olympic trials. So that was pretty amazing. After I got divorced, I became engaged to a wonderful man. He was very wealthy, different lifestyle than I was used to, and I adapted to it, and he was a wonderful person. But as you said, I was hit by a car in St. Bart's, and I was in a coma for 5 weeks, and our relationship did not make it through the year of physical therapy and other therapies that I had to have to recover from that accident. So that went by the wayside. And then I hit an age where I realized I needed to do something for myself. I was going to be retiring in 10 years. And I started to look around the world of where could I make an environmental and social impact and where I could be happy. And so about 10 years, I traveled throughout the United States and also throughout the world. I even went to Bhutan and the Galapagos Islands, and started volunteering for the David Sholdick Wildlife Trust. I worked with Game Rangers International in Zambia, and those are both elephant orphanages, but they're much bigger than that. They also do anti-poaching and help do laws throughout the world to not have ivory traded and things. And 1 year I came to South Africa to work at Makalali, and I couldn't believe I loved it. I just loved it. So for 3-4 years, I came back and then finally bought land and built in this reserve, because this reserve is for the animals. And you live here. By living here, I'm actually helping have a wild space for lions, leopards, elephants, giraffes, zebras. So it fit all my needs. And
well, we're definitely going to be playing, and I should say, I mean, it's so humbling to have you on our show. And there's this surge of hope, in this day and age, we want to be refreshed. We want to be invigorated. Our fashion correspondent, Lucy Larita in Melbourne, reminds me often, and so does our London beauty correspondent in London, Rubina Latif, as does our travel correspondent, Mr. Robert Pulaski, and it goes on. We want positivity, and it's so invigorating to hear what you have to say and your roadmap. Before we actually get to the continent of Africa, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a first. Yay, an exclusive from South Africa. You're our first from the African continent. Can I ask you this? And I think what we want to do today is learn from you, because I think people have lost some of their dream. And you told me during our pre-interviews and behind now in the green room, that in actual fact, it's all about planning. But before we get our first footstep into the continent of Africa, can I ask you, what would you say was the biggest challenge of your life before Africa? I'd love to know that first. What was the biggest hurdle?
Well, I have two, probably. One was going through the divorce. I'm Catholic. I believed when you got married for life. And I truly loved my husband. And it took 3 or 4 years to realize that things were not going the way they were going to go, and that they weren't going to change. And it did take a lot of assessing the current situation. Could it change? Could it be better? If it couldn't, what do I need to do? And that was like 4 or 5 years of going back to get my master's so that I could get a job. And I got a job with IBM, and also preparing my children for a divorce, but then also, for their parents to be working separate and living separately. That was difficult. The other one was the accident. I don't remember the accident. I don't remember about 6 to 8 months of my life, but I do know for about 18 months after I actually became aware, of the relationship didn't make it. I have some residual impacts from that accident. And it took a while to adapt my life so that I could continue as normal as possible.
Can I ask you a question, which I think is on the top of everybody's lips and thoughts? How does one recover from such an accident? I had no idea it was 18 months of initial repair. What goes on in your mind? Do you know, because a lot of people do get debilitated from accidents and they never recover. What's your secret? What was your secret for recovery?
Well, it's funny is the doctors in St. Bart's and in Miami Memorial Jackson in Miami, which is where I was actually finally flown to. They said that the fact that I was in such good health and in such good shape, and that my body, I had stressed my body through marathons and through triathlons, that my body knew what to shut down and what not to shut down. When I have a traumatic brain injury, I actually have an open head wound. So I was one of the very few people who would have ever recovered from that and not be in assisted living. So that's an amazing thing. And thank God for exercise for that.
What about mentally? Mentally, I mean, physically, I get. What goes in your brain that you can share with us?
Emotionally, it was very difficult for two reasons. Because it's hard to understand that your brain's not working well because you don't see that, but others do, but you don't. And they tell you that it's not working well, but you have a hard time grasping that. And the other thing is because my brain wasn't working well, it took me longer to emotionally process things, like the breakup. It just takes a much longer time to emotionally. So it was quite frustrating. And to be honest, I was on Valium. I had a lot of anxiety going through that time period. And I saw a psychiatrist and everything, and we had to work through it. But it was amazing, as they did say my brain would heal itself as best as possible over 5 to 10 years. And it really did.
Seriously.
Things got better, and I could tell that it got better. And so that's great. I now take maybe once or twice a year, usually when I get on a plane, I have to take a Valium. That's the only time I need it now.
That's it, and that's what you take.
That's all.
A really fatal, almost near fatal accident. It's extraordinary. I'm just going to put you behind the green room for a moment, and we're going to carry on with the actual thing that is probably before Africa. What was the highlight before you stepped on the continent of Africa that you can share with us? We'll be right back after just this little breakette. I just want to welcome you all. This is an extraordinary interview. It's the first time we've all gone on safari together to South Africa. And I also want to say that I want to welcome my dear sister Lillian, who is here. She's about 7 kilometers away that way, staying in a quarantine hotel. She's a superstar. We're going to also have her on as an architect coming up. And I just want to, on behalf of all of us at Henry and Friends Live, my mother and father who are waiting, cannot wait. She's halfway through the mark. She's such an inspiration. So welcome to her. Again, all of those who are just joining us are new. We have got Kristen Furseth. You've come on a really good day because it's the very first time we've actually had anybody from the continent of Africa, from corporate America, living in Africa and living the dream. So I'm just going to do a little bit of a slice here, and we're going to be right back with part 2 of this interview, which is basically before Kristen Furseth got to Africa, what was the highlight up to that point from IBM and France and New York and Amsterdam and a plethora of corporate achievements, including the Netherlands and including the Michigan state government. But I want to know from all of that, what were some of her biggest highlights? And I'm going to do a bit of a teaser because I'm going to actually show you a little bit of the wildlife that Kristen Furseth actually contends with now before we go into highlights before she got here. Take a look at this. And how classic is that? So ladies and gentlemen, it's exactly 8:50 a.m. on a Sunday morning in Sydney, Australia. That makes it 6:50 p.m. on a Saturday night in New York City, and exactly 50 minutes past midnight in Johannesburg, where our awesome special guest is talking to us exclusively and live here on Henry and Friends. Welcome back. I love that thing with the waterfall, but we'll get to that later on. That has actually blitzed social media. All my friends are calling me up, and people on Henry and Friends Live going, and my sister Lillian and my sister Michelle saying, "Oh my God, how did you not fall through that?" But that was a little bit of a teaser. But can you tell us, with all the highlights you had before Africa, what was one of the things that you'd say was the highlight of your life up until Africa?
Okay, so I'd like to say that my life has three sections. There's the athletic, the professional, and the personal. And the athletic is making it to the Olympic trials and going and competing. Now, that was right after my accident, and it was extremely difficult because my pituitary gland didn't work. And I was one of the first athletes to ever be allowed steroids while competing, but that's because my body didn't make it. So that was pretty cool. And my son at the time was 18, and he was able to go with me to the Olympic trials. And I was one of the oldest people to ever qualify for a track and field event for the United States Olympic trials. So that was great. That was a lifelong dream. Professionally, when I went to the Netherlands for IBM, I was the first single woman with children to be an expat, to be an American worker working in a foreign office. And I didn't realize at the time, but a lot of the general managers and our vice president of procurement didn't think that it would work. They didn't think that a woman would be able to stay in a foreign country on her own with two children. It did help that I spoke Dutch and that I had friends there, but I also lived in France with IBM, and we did quite well. So the fact that I blew them out of the water with the success that we had in global procurement in Europe because of my presence was great. And then in my personal life, it'd probably be the birth of my two children because they're wonderful, they're great.
That's actually really beautiful. Not one that I thought of. You know, it's so important to be broadening because a lot of women that give birth say that, and it's so humbling to be reminded of that on this Fathering Day in Australia and other places all around the world, because there's a real cross-pollination of nurturing and guidance from the adult to the child and the baby. So that's absolutely incredible. I'm just going to ask you another question, and that is one of many. Was there a moment, because I want to know how this, was there that moment where you woke up one day and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to go and live in Africa. I'm going to actually live my dream. I'm going to live in the dream. I'm going to live in Africa. I'm going to leave corporate America. Could you please share with us on this exclusive interview at Henry and Friends Live, how does this happen? How did we make that happen? How did you make it happen?
So it wasn't clear to me. I first went to Kenya to the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust in Nairobi, and then I lived in Kafue National Park in Zambia. And I've also volunteered in Zimbabwe. Those are three countries I would not have felt comfortable living in for a variety of reasons. Kafue National Park is very remote, and Nairobi, the traffic and the people, a lot of people. It's a beautiful city, but it's very, very busy. So, and when Sheldrick Wildlife Trust said, well, why don't you try Makalali in South Africa? You know, I heard a lot about apartheid and everything, and I was a little tentative. But when I came here to Hoedspruit, which is where I'm at, I couldn't believe how wonderful it was and how wonderful Makalali, which is a big 5 reserve here, and the animals that you see daily and how much endorphin that gives you to see an elephant every day. And I came back 6 months later and just loved it, and then started talking to people and then realizing that this area here is like my people. They all are here for wildlife conservation, for environmental reasons. Most of the reserves, we talked about this before, but there's the formal Kruger National Park. It's about the size of. So 25 years ago or so, farmlands, they were not productive here. So a lot of developers bought them. And what they did was they took all the farm stuff out and they brought in the indigenous area, indigenous animals, and planted indigenous trees and things. And so like for a development that's like 30,000 acres, they'll reserve 8,000 acres where there could be maybe 40 homes. But those 40 homes pay a monthly fee that pay for the rest of the acreage to be used for wild game. And that includes anti-poaching teams, a game warden, any veterinary care of the endangered animals, etc. And I just loved that premise that I can live here, and by just living here, I am helping have wild land for African animals.
So then sorry, I don't want to disturb you there. So just to get onto that point before we get into the Africa side, because I've got some really interesting questions. One from our very regular viewer and audience, Mr. Jeffrey Alvin himself in New Jersey, in New York, which I'll get to. But so what you're saying is some people have their dream and it's just a knee jerk, they bungee off into life. What I think you're saying, and actually what we can take away and our audience, is in actual fact, it was the plan was you wanted to change your life, or you wanted to change that part of the rest of your life, and you went about it quite systematically, and you went about it quite thoughtfully. So it had to tick off quite a few boxes, right?
Right. And I kept coming back. Every 6 months I came back to make sure that things were what I thought they were, that it was as real as I thought they were. And, you know, once I realized this was the place, that the people are fantastic, the area is fantastic, it's diverse. I felt it. This was my place. And then it took about 2 or 3 years of finding property, building a house, finding the right big five I want to live in. And the fact that now Kruger National Park is now called the Greater Kruger National Park. It's almost doubled in size, which is great for the elephant population and everything. Just really fills my heart.
So you know what's so interesting, because I remember now, I had this in the back of my mind because I always planned to do a podcast, right? And I thought about Henry and Friends Live, and then I thought, there has to be some kind of connection, first, second, or third generation connection, just like in LinkedIn. And I recall specifically seeing your posts, the build up. And so for all of those people that are listening this morning and are joining us throughout the world, the interesting thing is that you really just set an example, because it's one thing to have pie in the sky, and then there's a whole different story from pre-planning. So that's incredible. I'm going to invite you back into the green room. We have some interesting questions coming up, and I might just do a little snippet as we almost come into the hour. You are blowing up the switchboard, I have to tell you. We'll be back with Kristen in a second. So it's, as I promised you, it's so interesting. And I think the thing to take away at the moment is a determination. I mean, from a person that had really quite a serious accident that, could have been fatal, the way her body and her mind pushed through from coma to repair. It then went on from, working in corporate America, a divorce, but making sure that one of her number one joys and her number one, accolades for her life is the birth of her children, which is so very, very interesting. I want to remind you that you are on Henry and Friends Live. We now beam around the world, including Africa, New Zealand, Australia, America, London, United Kingdom, and many other countries. Do check us out on YouTube channel, and go down to our description box if you want to have any of the links on how to get hold of Kristen Furseth. And also I'll be including the new ABBA track, which is absolutely stunning. It does take a few listens, but it's called Voyager, and that's what we're doing this weekend. We're almost coming up to the hour. It is exactly 12 midnight. So London is about to go from Saturday night to Sunday morning. In the east coast of America, it's going to 7 p.m. at night. In Johannesburg, it's going to exactly 1 a.m. in the morning. And that just shows you it's not just enough to make a dream happen, but Kristen Furseth makes it happen through hard work. And here in Sydney, Australia, we're going into a blue sky, sunny day at 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning. You're listening to Henry and Friends Live. I'm going to just take you to another little bit of a snippet of Kristen Furseth before we get into the African experience. Please, any questions, thoughts, or comments, we invite them in right now, and take a look at this.
boys here. There's a baby and a teenager.
These are actually original shots that you've taken. How close are you when you take these photographs? And there's experience with, actually, before we say anything, could you please tell us about that waterfall? Like,
Okay, so that's at the Devil's Pool. I had read about that, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. And I was like, I need to go there. It's on the Zambian side of Victoria Falls, and you can only sit in the Devil's Pool in the month of November because that's when the water is at its lowest. Right. And you actually swim out there, and they do have a little line you can hold on to if you don't feel comfortable enough. And it is amazing because you go there from Livingstone's Island. So when I was working in Kruger National Park in Zambia, it was very remote. It was we were monitoring elephant populations. It was difficult. And so one of my free weekends, I took a bus, a 7-hour bus ride.
really?
Down to Victoria Falls, spent 2 days down there, and then did that. And it just, it fills up your battery so you can go run, work in a really hot, tick-filled
Fills
place.
up your batteries. Hold on, fills up your batteries. My batteries would have been short-circuited. I think everybody that just saw that. I mean, you're literally perched just as you were. Come on, Kristen. How do you do that? Like, that's, why do you do that? How do you do that?
They actually they did not want to show that they were holding on to my legs. And I'm like, no, you have to, because my children know I'm afraid of heights, and they know I would never do this unless someone was actually holding on to my legs. But I love it. I'd go back and do it. I highly recommend it. Go to Zambia in November.
Let me tell you something. I had a bath this morning. I was thinking about that waterfall, and the closest I'm ever going to get to that is the water cascading from the faucet in my bath. But I think it's just as extraordinary. What I want to do is ask you probably what is also on the mind of many people, and one of our very avid listeners and viewers, Mr. Jeffrey Alvin. I'll put the question up in a moment, but I'll tell you, what he's saying is, and we'll get into the socioeconomic and the community issues, but basically what Jeffrey Alvin is saying and asking is, what is your experience now with community diversity and inclusion? We hear one side. What's your experience, and how is that interaction from your experience?
It's been wonderful. Now, you do have to realize that being white, I am a minority here. And so like today, I helped Halo. It's a Hood Animal Outreach Center. And we go to the villages and we vaccinate and take care of their dogs, their village dogs. And we also take them to the vet if they need any vet assistance. And that's paid for. And they're also sterilized. Yvette, who's from the Netherlands, was the driver, and I was a helper. And we were the only white people. But you don't really notice it. When I go to the mall, Acorn Mall, I might be the only white person. There might be another one, but you don't really notice it. You really don't. Now, Hood, the little town that I'm next to, is about 50-50 white and black. And you just see everybody. I've joined a Mar-a-Lago hiking group, and we went hiking up. I'm in the Drakensberg Mountains, and we went hiking there 2 weeks ago. I was the only white person in the group. But it's not a big deal. It's been really good. There is a very strong middle-class black population here in Hood. There's also lower-class blacks and lower-class whites, and there's some farms, citrus farms, so you really get a mixture. But that's the one thing I did like, is I like the diversity here.
So do you think the media portrays one kind of existence living in Africa and your actual experience? Do you think there's a discrepancy there?
Well, I think the media does that all over the world, because I lived an hour outside of Detroit, and Detroit is not what everyone in the rest of the world think Detroit is like. There are pockets of Detroit that I would not go into after 8 o'clock at night, but there's also pockets in Johannesburg I wouldn't go into. There's pockets in Amsterdam. There's pockets in Paris. So, media is going to report on what's going to catch eyeballs. I have found things to be very wonderful here and very nice. I've never been treated badly by anybody. And it's very peaceful. But again, I'm in Hoedspruit, which I do understand is not as, because we just had some riots here.
Yeah.
Was that 4 weeks ago when Zuma went to jail? But that wasn't a white-black thing. That was two different parties.
That's fascinating. That is absolutely fascinating and heartening. It really, really is, because it's the first time, and I've read a lot about what was happening in South Africa, as all of us probably have, and that's a really interesting insight. It wasn't a black or white thing.
No.
Amazing.
What's really interesting is I've been told by a lot of people here is that since the blacks have been in power the ANC's been in power for 25 years, I believe 24, 25 years, they now realize it wasn't white people who are corrupt. It's just powerful people who are corrupt.
That's actually a problem and an issue all around the world. Being aware, being conscious. You're really on a race of the individual spirit, aren't you? Holding that individual spirit and being a vanguard of it. Would you agree with that?
Yes, yes.
And that's the actual that's actually the force of our book that I've been writing with my father for the last 32 months. The stories I told my son. It's really the race of the individual spirit and the vanguard of humanity. So I think my father and you truly relate. And all those people at the moment that are really wanting to, regardless of the environment or what's happening with the pandemic, is to really hold on to their personal individuality in a democratic environment. There we go. We got a little bit political there. But what I'd like to do is just also tell you about next week's show. So I'm going to put you in the green room for a moment. If you want to have a sip of water. Are you enjoying yourself?
I am. This is fun.
It is fantastic. I want to remind everybody, it's actually 1:07 a.m. on a Sunday morning in Johannesburg at the Greater Kruger National Park, where our guest is actually given the grace and the generosity of her time. So please, any comments that can really welcome Kristen Furseth, as we have been doing, any comments, Caroline McGuinness from Melbourne is welcoming you. We've got people from Melbourne, from Mexico, from Tennessee, from London, from New Jersey, from Darling Harbour, from Sydney, Australia, from Melbourne. So we want to welcome you. I'm just going to put you into the green room. You can take a breath, because when we come back, after we talk about what's on next week, we're going to get into some of your life lessons and the syrup that makes Kristen Furseth. We'll be right back. I promised you in the most amazing interview, and we're just so absolutely delighted to have Kristen Furseth. Don't forget, next weekend, we have the gorgeous, delicious, fabulous Rubina Latif, our beauty correspondent from London, who works directly with Kiehl's at Regent Street at Liberty. She's created on behalf of Kiehl's a facial. She's been known to create her own entrepreneurial business, Mother Earth, and she's going to be on next weekend talking about beauty trends, the hits and the misses. So that's one definitely to watch. We're just going to have a quick little what I call the I can't even speak now because I'm so excited. The little brand of I can't talk. I'm really quite taken aback by this interview, but I found it. I was buying time. So this really is living the dream with Kristen Furseth. We're going to be back in 4 seconds talking about the syrups of life as we come to 10 past the hour, wherever you are in the globe. Technical. I'm getting there with my switchboard. So I want to ask you, because we've got a few bullet points. And the very first one I want to actually put up. So we've spoken about your backstory, about how you got to Africa. We've talked about community and integration. We've talked about the highs of your career, the highs of your life, the challenges, which was the divorce and the accidents and Bart's coming out of your coma and into real living. But now I think people want to know the syrup, the actual thing that makes you TikTok. So just going on to that, the very first one, and I'd love to go through the points, is for you to explain in the next 5 or 8 minutes towards the end of the show. Some of these syrups that we can take home, and here we go. The first one was curveball. Stop and assess your needs and wants. What does that mean?
So when you realize, or when I realized something was not going correct, like my marriage wasn't going correct, or my career wasn't going correct, sometimes you get a lot of depression and anxiety because you're like a duck, you're paddling like crazy underneath, and you're not really looking at the bigger picture. And I have to stop and assess what is happening. Does it need to change? And how does that need to change? And I also go back and I look at the needs and wants that I want, or at the time, my children, what did they need? What did they want? And I make a plan. So I can say, okay, so this marriage is not working. So I need to find a way to support myself and my children and make it as easy transition for my children as possible. So those are the needs and wants. The same of after my accident, I had I lost another relationship, and I had to find some purpose in my life. And so what was that purpose going to be? So I had to go back and live the things that made me happy. They tend to be from when I was a child. I love animals. I love helping people. So I figure out where I'm at and where do I need to go.
And then and also what I have learned, and it's, I think, a big lesson for us. We get nervous, we get anxious. You want things to happen so quickly. And what your lesson to all of us is, take it slowly, because you've really got to, knee jerk is not always the best jerk, so to speak. Right. I don't know if that's the same, but anyway. The next one here, which I found fascinating while we were discussing this, building up to your show, is find your inner 6 or 7 year old.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Oh, okay. So I watched Born Free when I was like 6 or 7 years old. And my mother says today, I knew she was going to move to Africa after she saw that movie. Even she recognized that Africa was probably a place I've always wanted to go. And I never thought I could afford to even come and visit South Africa or even Africa. But I found a way to be able to do that.
That's absolutely, some people say that we always have our inner child, but what you're saying is connect to the dreams of your inner child, plan it, don't forget it, go back to the source. Oh my God, we've got people commenting, Donna Harris in Newcastle, Australia, north coast of New South Wales, saying it's a really inspirational, wonderful day. After this, Kristen, we really do welcome you to go back on all these comments with all the people and just make contact with them. Okay. But the next, because they're loving you. We're all loving you. At 13 minutes past 1 a.m. in the morning in Johannesburg. Wow. Here's the next one. Make a plan. Yes, I know. You're doing so well. Make a plan and start moving. What does that mean?
So that's what I have found to really help me deal or cope with bad situations, or when I start getting anxious, is I make the plan. Okay, getting my master's degree. I had to take classes before I could be accepted to get to Michigan State to get my master's. So I took statistics and I think it was calculus or something. So, but I had a plan. This is what I needed to do. Then I had to take the GRE, that I was going to get to the school, that I was going to get an internship with an international company because I wanted to intern abroad. So once you have that plan, or once I have that plan and I have steps, and I try not to make them so concrete that if I miss a step, it freaks me out or knocks me off. I make them kind of wide. But then once I'm moving on that plan, that keeps my anxiety and depression at bay because I'm working it. It took me 4 years to get my master's degree, to get the pre-enrollment stuff done, then the master's degree, then my internship with IBM, and then being hired by IBM. But the fact that I was moving in that direction was very calming for me.
That's fascinating. So the thing is, you're quite right, because if you're not having your end plan, the dream, right? Living the dream sounds really easy. You just pick up a magic wand and the dream appears. You're saying, know what the plan is, know the goalposts, set down the tiles that, pave the road to the goal, and then the dream arrives, not the other way around, which is really interesting. By the way, this is a real networking show, as you can imagine, because we're networking with you. And I have a request, and I'll just put it on the comments thing here. And this is from the delicious Andrea Augusta. So I'm going to I know we can't read this. I'm going to read this out to you. Andrea, forgive us because it's a bit small print for people that whatever, but I'll just read it out first of all. This is what it says. It's beautiful. My son has volunteered a few times in South Africa. He spent 5 months there in 2019. I met him in East Africa in 2019 and spent traveling around Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. Such a rewarding experience. I can understand why you love it so much. I would love to put my son in touch with you. So what we do is you can both, we connection, because we're all about networking. So Andrew, there you have it live on our show that Kristen Furseth is going to connect with you, and then we'll see what magic we can make happen. I want to go on to the...
For moving to Africa, to move to South Africa, when I finally decided that Hoedspruit was where I wanted to be, that was a 3-year adventure.
Really?
Because I keep coming over, because I had to figure out which development I wanted to live in, and they all have different rules and things. And I do have 3 blind cats that had to come with me. So I had to find land. I first tried to find a house, but I couldn't find a house that would be safe for 3 blind cats in this area. So then I had to find a development, and then I had to find a builder, and then I had to build a house. And then of course, COVID happened. So again, it was it was a long 3 years, but now I'm here and it's great. I mean, it's amazing. Every day is amazing. It's just,
but
and
it
I'm
didn't
a personality, and I don't have any of the issues here. It's just amazing.
It didn't happen overnight, and it really just reminds us we're all reaching for goals. Some of those goals have been put by the side, and I think if anything, it's a real rejuvenation of our goals, our dreams, but the hard work and the planning that it takes to get there. I'm going to leave you with the last question, before we take a break, and we're going to come back for you to think about a little bit. And that is, from all of this interview, what's the one piece of advice, the one slice of your experience that you can leave us with regard to living the dream, living in Africa, and leaving what you have behind? So I'm going to put you in the green room so you can have a think about it. And I think we need to look at you in the waterfall again. I really do. Please stand by. This has been a delightful show. I have to tell you, I've been so excited. I remember Kirsten in 2005 coming into our bridal salon and just being delighted. And we've been in contact. So it's just such a joy. All these years later, you never know how people come back into your life. And again, so gracious. A big applause to our most gorgeous special guest coming live from the Greater Kruger National Park, who's joined us, and so many takeaways which we'd like to summarize at the end. So I have to indulge, as Jeffrey Alvin says, with a slice, because we need to look at Kristen Furseth one more time doing her thing at this waterfall, being held on by her hands, literally looking at the water cascading down below her. I mean, you got to love it. Here we
Future came to me, I see, yeah. So classic, you and me.
How do I feel? Awesome.
It's awesome.
This is awesome. Oh my God.
Awesome is the word that describes this extraordinary guest. I feel like we've been on a safari, a journey of life. I still have a few more comments here that I'm going to try and get to, because we're going to extend this by a few seconds. Andrea Augusta says, thank you so much for agreeing to connect safely on our message board. Caroline McGuinness, I too once as a child worked in Africa, so there's that connection. And Lucy Larita, our fashion correspondent, is saying, blown away, as my switchboard is. So I'm going to hand it over to you for the last 60 seconds. What word of advice, what syrup, what Kristen Furseth syrup of life could you possibly leave us with?
Okay, first of all, that's Victoria Falls in that video. As a woman, and as most women in the world, we are brought up to serve others. And I finally got to a point in my life that I could serve myself. So I had to feel what I really wanted to do, and I really wanted to help wildlife. And I planned and I made it happen. And a lot of people, including friends of mine, just cannot believe that I upped and moved to South Africa from the United States, a great country. But I love it here. And every day I'm living my dream. And I really implore people that when you get to a point in your life that you can live your dream, plan it out. It may seem that you can't reach it because in 3 months you can't, but you might over 3 years. Really live it, because this is why we're alive.
I have to tell you, with the project that we're on, many projects that we're all working on, you've given us so much inspiration. On the project I've been working for 32 months, I think that's a long time, but I have very high goals for my project with my father. And you know what? All of a sudden, the 32 months have melted away because it's just begun again. And really, can I thank you profusely for your generosity of spirit, your time, your energy. We're going to have an after show for anybody that wants to stay behind, where we do a little bit of a chit chat on how you felt the show went. You must join us next weekend, because we have Ravina Latif talking about the beauty trends directly from London W1. So we'll be transporting ourselves on there. Thank you so very much. Stay behind, Kirsten, for a few seconds. Anyone that wants to join us as I summarize this show and we have a little chit chat before you turn the solar panels off. Thank you so very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been years in the coming of this interview, but an absolute joy and pleasure to have hosted you all today. What we always do is we go back to the description box and we look at all your comments and we always get back to them. Don't forget, next weekend we have the beauty show. We've got some amazing shows coming up. My sister Lillian will be on Henry and Friends Live talking about her architecture when she gets back to New York. My sister Michelle Roth will be featured doing a bridal show, as my dear friends from Canada will also be talking about bridal. We have the extraordinary Wendy Diamond talking about Women's Entrepreneurship Day and so much more. Signing off and saying it's just an absolute pleasure and honor to have you join us. And now, if you want to stay behind, you'll hear the behind the scenes going live. Thank you and have a great week. Wow. How did you enjoy it? How did you enjoy that?
That was good. That went faster than I thought.
It goes fast, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it goes really fast. Is it what you expected the show to be?
Yes, I did. It'd be really, how do I contact these people? How do I see their comments?
Okay, so what you do is, if you go on to, the probably easiest way is two things. There's two sets of comments. If you go on to Henry and Friends Live, the Facebook page, if you want to do that now, if you join Henry and Friends Live Facebook page, so it's Henry AND Live, then what happens is, once you actually join the page, then I can tag, then you can tag, I can tag. But once you go onto that, so it's Henry and Friends Live, and then you just hit, you want to join, then you become part of the community. The other set of now, so what happens with YouTube?
Oh, I think I think I'm already on it.
You're on it. I think you might be.
Well,
the other. Sorry.
Yeah, I am following this page. I'm already following
this
page.
Fantastic. So what happens is, I normally then, as soon as this is over, I always make sure that I pin this show to the top. I then go to YouTube, we change the cover. Then also, I would say within a week, I'll give you a call and I'll tell you how we did on YouTube. Last weekend, we had 5,500. The weekend before on the dating show, we had 8,500 views. Wow. So that's really good, yes. But that doesn't
talk about dating here.
Sorry, darling?
Nobody asked me about dating here.
Well, don't worry. We'd love to invite you back and talk to you about dating. That's going to be really interesting. Dating in South Africa. I've also got a guest.
Oh, my God. You have to be a meat eater, apparently.
You have to be a meat eater in many respects. Oh, my
God. They eat so much meat. And I don't eat. I eat chicken occasionally and fish occasionally. But I went to someone's house for brunch. I'm not joking. There was 5 kinds of meat and nothing else. I'm like, how
does the discussion about how does the discussion about meat and dating? Don't answer that. How does that correlation? But I will say as well, the other way with comments, around the middle of this week coming up, go onto YouTube, Henry and Friends Live. Please subscribe, and then once you subscribe, that will then allow you to go onto the comments. And that's a different, audience. I got 5 more. I just want to see, there's a lot of comments here. Thank you, Kristen from Melbourne. From Caroline McGuinness, thank you, Henry. I agree. Big dreams and working on your purpose is worth it. On that, Donna Harris, who's in Newcastle, New South Wales. Kristen's story is relevant all age brackets, young and younger. It is a story that can be applied at all stages of life. And on that level, a huge applause. Go to sleep, take care, and I'll get those figures to you. Please do respond because you've got quite a few people that have really enjoyed this. Have a great weekend. Take care.
Okay. Good night, Henry.
Good night. Wow. So to all of you, we've got some amazing shows coming up. We're on to about our 9th month of Henry and Friends Live. It's all about building up a network so that when I get the publishing deal with Henry and Friends Live, I have the basis of a really, really beautiful show. And I'm going to finish off with one of my most favorite people around the world. Rianne is a stunning, gorgeous woman. You should look her up when you look at the messages down below. We did some work together on, what was that? The Housewives of Melbourne. And she was sharing the room next to me. And I tell you what, an extraordinary, beautiful soul and beautiful woman from the inside out. So thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate that. Oh my God. Thanks. Thanks, Hanky. That was my name. Anyway, enough of all of that because we'll have nothing to say for next weekend. Don't forget the ABBA, the new single, play it and play it. I'm going to be playing it now, and I'm off very shortly to my parents, and we're not calling it Father's Day. We're calling it Happy Parents' Day. So I'll tell you about that next weekend. Take care. You're an amazing audience. Very honoured. Bye for now.